All right, we are live, and today we're going to talk about the number one mistake, leadership mistake, that I know I certainly try and avoid. I think it's been proven in a couple of research and surveys that I've read as being one of the most frustrating aspects of leadership, probably the biggest communication mistake that leaders can make. And it has to do with creating more confusion, adding to ambiguity and uncertainty. And so as a leader, my number one goal, whether I'm communicating with my wife or my kids, whether it's I'm talking to clients that I'm working with or working with contractors or people that work with me, I want to reduce or eliminate as much unnecessary ambiguity and uncertainty as possible. When I am creating uncertainty or I'm creating confusion, unfortunately what happens is it starts to clouds people, their head, their ability to think and operate at a high level. And instead, they're overthinking, overanalyzing, trying to guess, fill in the blanks, right? They're worrying about making me happy. They're focused on a whole host of things that have nothing to do with empowering them to do the very best work they can do. And if it's dealing with my kids, right, and their head is now flooded with ambiguity, and they're having to make the dozens and dozens of decisions throughout the day they have to make about, do I choose to do something that is consistent with my values? Do I choose to do something that's a great use of my character strengths? Instead, if their head is flooded with, I don't know the right direction to move in, right? There's enough confusion at home and there's inconsistencies, and dad sometimes says one thing, and then his actions do something completely else. It really sets them up to make bad decisions. They're going to make decisions based out of fear and insecurity and worry. And so what Mr. David Osk, as we talk about leadership and about how we can help to reduce ambiguity and uncertainty, what do you have to say about the subject?
No, I think it's more important than we would tend to believe. And I think experientially, so those of us, especially, who've had a mom and a dad and now who are, have children and so on a very, practical level. I mean, man, I know that if Parker, my, soon to be 17-year-old, if he senses that even the question mark in me, it makes him unsettled, right?
Yep.
He is looking to me, and rightfully so, as the leader of this house to set the tone, to set the pace. And if he senses that question mark, in me or over my head or, whatever that image is, it's like, okay, who am I going to get today here? Who should I be? And when we flip that on its head, right, when I know exactly, what defines the boundaries of this family in a very, virtuous way, well, guess what happens? He gets up feeling, and Kate for that matter, and I do for that matter, right?
That's right.
But feeling safe on a very basic level. It's like, I know what I'm standing on today and what direction I'm going. So I love this topic. And of course, you extrapolate that into any organization. Boy, this is super powerful.
Yeah, I remember it was the very first employee that I ever actually had. I took on a psych assistant, really talented, amazing young man. And one of the first projects, I gave him something to work on, a blog to write and to do a little research for me. And he came back at the end of the pay period and he sent me his hours. And it was maybe quadruple what I was anticipating, right? And my initial response, I was really frustrated. I was upset. I was putting together a message to him that was like, this is unacceptable. You can't do this. You do this again, I feel like you're taking advantage of me. Fortunately, before I sent anything, right, I was able to reflect and recognize it was a failure of leadership. I had done a really poor job of setting him up for success. I had not outlined to him what the priority was on this, what my expectation was as far as how much time he should spend. I mean, I really hadn't given him any real clear guidance. I just kind of sent him, here's something with the expectation that somehow he would know, right, to do everything within the parameters that were silently kept inside of me. And so I redrafted, I deleted the message I was going to send him, right? And I took full ownership and said, hey, I think I really failed you on this. I know I didn't do a very good job of telling you what my expectations were and setting up, how much of a priority this was versus something else I needed him to work on. And said, so, just next time I'm going to do a better job of outlining parameters. And then if, you start to go beyond those parameters, here's what I need you to do. I just need you to check in with me, right? Let's just make sure we're communicating. I want this to be a safe space. And if you're frustrated or the directions aren't clear, that's my job to make that clear for you. It was amazing. Yeah. The very next project that I had him do was completely in parameters. It was amazing work. I set him up for success. That doesn't mean that I did, nothing but great leadership from that point forward. But
Yeah,
it's amazing when you suddenly start to set expectations. You're really clear on what the priorities are, how it empowers people then to kind of meet those expectations.
I love that. I love that. The expectation, I'm not sure how that kind of plays into the progression of that certainty, but it's fascinating how an expectation can just absolutely make or break a relationship, a day, a moment. And I know that, my family or business and everything else, I hope that I project a consistency,
Yeah.
that people know what to expect from me. And because it's on another level too, right? When people sense that in you, they're going to treat you, as such. So if you have uncertainty, if you're projecting uncertainty, you're not sure what you're going to get from people around you. And
Yep.
that creates, it's just that vicious cycle. It creates more uncertainty in yourself. So to stop that cycle, and define those things is really important.
Yeah, I've seen in working with some business owners and leaders, right, where they've got mission statements and values, they've got stuff printed up on the wall, but they know that the decisions they're making, the clients they're taking on, the way they're conducting business is totally inconsistent with those values. And so
Right.
now you've got employees, right, who see the mission statement, who read the values. Maybe you start off meetings by reciting certain things, but they see that the actual actions and the day-to-day operations are wildly inconsistent, right? And it really does create a lot of confusion. And it starts to really set, as far as a culture or the identity of a business, what really does matter. Is it just business success and income revenue at all costs? Is it doing it with a certain level of character, right? And so now, what they should prioritize and how they should conduct business is not a clear case of this is what we're all about. Instead, it's really confusing. And that sets, again, people up to really make decisions without a strong foundation. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. You use the words, on the outset here, ambiguity, confusion, uncertainty. And what I think is interesting, well, whether it's family or, an organization of some sort, it's not this idea that we just want to remove that to kind of get to ground zero. It's for a reason, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
We're moving forward, we're moving into and unto something else. And I think that it's really important to understand, if I'm going to do some of the deep work over here to remove the uncertainty, whether it's inside, here, family, work, it's for a reason. It's
Yeah.
to make this, this life better. And so to do, not only to define what certainty looks like, but then of course to define what better looks like, it really helps to kind of get through the weeds and push through some of, just some of that work to understand those things.
Yeah, I love that. Right. I think even just defining what success is, defining certain words, as you're putting together a corporation, really making sure that there's clarity around what the success looks like, and I know for my kids, right, different than it is necessarily for a business, but the same structure applies. I want them to understand that, playing the piano perfectly or getting, straight A's. Well, certainly that's great. What I care about, though, is the character that they're building along the way as they, put these performances together. I don't care about perfect performances, right? I really don't. But I do care about, them building resilience. I do care about them, staying committed to something they've chosen to do, being responsible, right? I care about the attitude that they display in that pursuit. And I need to make sure that my messaging around that is really consistent, that that's what I value, right? So they understand that what they get reinforced for, what they get rewarded for is that character, right? If all of a sudden they have terrible character, but they get great results, and I'm like telling them how amazing they are, and I'm reinforcing that,
Yeah.
again, that's a mixed message that
Yeah.
says what dad really cares about is me just producing at a high level, right? That's what my value is instead of the character. And so it's really important to understand, what are you course correcting and what are you rewarding or reinforcing? Because that's really setting a strong message as far as what you value. Does that make
Love that.
sense?
Absolutely. What's fascinating when you said that, it made me think of a few moments that I've had. I live in Nashville, Tennessee, and I'm around a lot of musicians. And of course I do some music myself. And I've been in so many moments when, a really famous person, whether we're in the studio or even on stage, will make a mistake, right? They'll forget the lyrics, or, they're playing some guitar solo and they're like, oh man. What's fascinating about that though is, I've seen where they kind of crumble.
Yeah.
They have so much uncertainty in them where it's, oh no. And it's a train wreck. But then I've also seen where there's so much certainty and character, that's inside of them, that not only are they able to laugh, at that moment or whatever it is, but then turn it into something that's actually really cool, like really, really funny, or tell a story, or, it's just, they understand it's just part of life, as opposed to, this crushing moment where I have to, somehow, get out of it or something. It's just, they have certainty, and they're sure of themselves.
Yeah, it's interesting. I've seen some of the clients that I work with, and the work that I do, where they are really technically great at what they do, right? They are amazing at building income, generating revenue, whatever it is, right? Being the CEO of a company, setting
Yeah.
the vision. But because they're filled with insecurities, and what's driving their success is ego, right? Fear, all these things. They create just damage. They create just this wake of destruction and chaos all along. And as they start to work with me, often because they're creating damage in other relationships in their life too, and we help them to start to really get settled inside. Hey, let's get to know yourself. Let's help you to understand what success really looks like for you. And let's help you to understand where fulfillment comes from, and so that you're able to effectively prioritize from moment to moment. What matters? Is it displaying your power and demonstrating that you're the alpha dog, or is it coming at it right there in that moment, with a clear, curiosity and a desire to lead and bring people, elevate their performance. And as people start to dial in, right, and who they uniquely are and what their
Yeah.
leadership tools that they bring to the table, it's amazing how they recognize that they thought they were great leaders, but people followed them because of their title, because they were often scared and intimidated by them,
Yeah.
right? And when suddenly they start to feel more secure within themselves, they start to actually invest in other people. They start to recognize what true leadership looks like.
Yeah.
So it's amazing that transformation that can take place and how much more effective that is.
You and I operate in a circle of entrepreneurs and so on. And one of the phrases that we often use is that, relationships, are matter. Like it's in fact,
Yeah.
it's at the pinnacle of everything. If so, what I love is when people have that, that sense of security, just what you just said, right? It's not just, I'm a robot, if you will, that got tweaked enough to operate at this high level. No, I'm actually causing my fellow man to thrive. I'm causing, everyone around me to, to go further up and further in, right?
That's right.
There's that you become in some ways a bit of a safety net around people. They feel secure around you, so much so that they're willing to make mistakes. They're willing to grow and fall down and get up, because they know, man, this guy's got my back. Like he is so invested in me. It's the paradigm is so much more compelling, and just beautiful. So a phrase that I've borrowed of yours, here, especially in the last couple of years, is, the authentic exemplar. So
Yeah.
we picture those people in our lives, that are kind of different, and we don't
Yep.
necessarily even know why. But when they walk into the room shifts,
Yeah.
right? The room gets better. The room gets safer. The room is filled with more joy, more purpose. There's an instant sense of direction and dignity that is brought into that space, just because they have such certainty. They have such clarity, right? There
Yeah.
is no ambiguity, all that kind of stuff. And I know that, I have several people in my life that I've always looked to, because I sense, that higher
Yeah.
good in them. And I don't think I would have been able to articulate why they were different, and why I really admired them. And on a very basic level, just wanted to be with them right
Yeah.
there. It's like, man, I'm sitting next to somebody who's filled with greatness. And at the same time, it's not necessarily about productivity. It's not that they might, they have all of these, accomplishments that the world would offer.
Yeah.
They enter the room, and the room gets better. And I think that you're driving home something here that, so let me spin this back on you. How does uniqueness play into, those people that that don't have that big question mark? How do you feel like that uniqueness is kind of front and center for them?
Yeah, well, I'll reflect on something that you had mentioned earlier in regards to building security and trust, right? And just understand like what creates trust. How do you build trust, whether it's in with your family, within the business and leadership, right? Trust comes as a byproduct of predictability, that there's consistency, so that that for instance, that someone's going to be honest, that they are consistently honest. And so there's a sense of predicting, right? You're not saying, well, sometimes they tell me the truth and sometimes they tell me wild stories, right? Sometimes they're completely full of crap. And
Yeah.
so instead of having to project and predict and it creates all this uncertainty, it's
Yeah.
like, I can relax and I can trust that what they're saying is true because they've shown with consistency that they're true, right? So the person has to value that. Well, we build self-trust, right? The more that we understand what's important to us and the more that we live to our own standards, we start to build trust within ourselves where we like realize that we're going to make the right choice, and it allows us to relax into ourselves, right? So there's the internal uncertainty that's the fundamental uncertainty that we all need to overcome if we want to have breakthroughs and we really want to reach our full potential, right? We need to understand, why am I choosing this direction versus that direction? In a heat of a moment, how am I able to effectively prioritize in real time, right? What really matters in this moment? Again, is it making a joke so everybody thinks that I'm the life of the party, or is it respecting people that matter the most to me, right? I mean, I've seen this happen
Love
with
that.
leaders over and over again, where, excuse me, before they were driven by ego. They had been hurt somewhere along life, right? And they kind of made this internal decision to themselves that I'm going to become powerful, right? I'm going to show people that I can't be pushed around or whatever it is. And so then they wield this power in ways that ends up really hurting the people that they swear that they care about the most. And it creates a lot of damage and a lot of regret. And they don't even really fully know why they're doing it.
Yeah.
But when we start to give them a framework to be able to effectively prioritize in the moment, to understand, hey, it really doesn't matter whether or not these people laugh at a really stupid joke, right? Something that's disrespectful to, my wife or to the other leaders in the organization. What matters is those people know that they are my priority. What matters is that I respect them and I show, that it's not just empty words, that they are the most important thing, but you can see through my actions. And when you start to show that with consistency and people start to recognize, hey, he really does prioritize us. He really does make us feel like the most important people in the room.
Yeah.
It's amazing how everybody then is also able to start to relax. They trust your intentions. They trust who you are. And now they're able to start thinking about higher level decisions, right? How can I actualize my potential? How can I do my very best work instead of that basic insecurity? Does he like me? Am I good enough? Right? Is he going to get mad at me today? Is he going to make a joke that makes me feel like like a little, piece of turd? Sorry, my language. I was trying to think of something better in the moment, but turd
Yeah.
came up.
Well, and what I like what you said too about relaxing into yourself, right?
Yeah.
And it does. It takes that piece of self-awareness. How am I different from the person next to me?
Yep.
I'm not going to relax into their identity, right? I'm relaxing into mine.
Yeah.
And to understand, what that, again, that kind of that hierarchy of things that rise to the top for me. Boy, to I identify those things and to operate in that space, to see and make decisions through that lens. Talk about certainty, right? But if I've not identified those things, thus identity, right? Well, then there's that question mark. Then there's that uncertainty and the ambiguity and internal chaos, which then produces external chaos. I'm tracking with you here. This is great.
Yeah. And my favorite personal development quote, I'll say this as often as I can, comes from Viktor Frankl. And it's between a stimulus, between what happens to us and how we respond, there's a space. And in that space is where our capacity for growth and freedom exists. But the thing is that's not an infinite space that we have there, right? So we only have often a limited amount of time. Now, hopefully we use that time, whether that's sometimes needing to say, let me think about this and come back with you a decision tomorrow, whether that's sometimes just being able to take a breath before you respond to a heated moment, right? But the ability to know who you are in those moments so that when you pause and take a space, that you're able to, again, prioritize in real time what really matters, right? What are the things that just have a disproportionate amount of value to me, and let me move towards those things? What are the strengths that I bring to this moment that are going to help me rise up and meet this challenge so that my employee and my team know I have this, right? I'm going to lead us in this 2-minute drill, to the promised land. What is the motivation? I think that the three pillars that if you really want to create consistency There's three things that we want to be consistent about kind of reinforcing here is you got to know your values. You got to know, and they've got to be so ingrained and internalized and consistent, right? That they are true of who you are in all areas of life so that they are driving your day-to-day decisions. They're driving the relationships you choose. They're driving the clients you take on, right? When you have consistency with that, you have a clear direction you're moving, right? You're not just zigzagging all over the place where it's like, man, this person is all over the place. In one way, he's going this way. In another area, that creates fragmentation and it creates chaos, right? It's confusing to the person and it's confusing to everyone around them.
Yeah.
So knowing your values, right? Knowing what's motivating or driving your behavior, like why do you do what you do? Most people, the research is clear. Most people have no idea why they do what they do, and yet they'll clearly give you a reason, right? They'll explain their intentions or things like that. But when you stop and pause to say, "Hey, why am I really doing this? What really matters? Am I doing this because I want social approval? Am I doing this because I just want to make money?" And again, making money is not bad. Social approval is not bad. But when that's the primary reason that you're choosing to be kind or you're choosing to build a relationship, again, it's a mixed message, right? You're on one hand saying, I value you, but what you're really saying is what I care about is what you can give me, right? And so it creates kind of this sense of an ulterior motive, and that's confusing. But when you know that, hey, I'm building this because I really value people and I want this person to know how much I care about them and I believe what I'm doing is going to better them, right? It's going to give them resources or whatever it is that you do. And when you're driven by that and it comes from a pure place, now all of a sudden you're building deep, lasting trust.
Yeah.
Right? And then knowing what your strengths are and having a very specific strategy for how you're applying them, right? That has the greatest impact. So
Love that. It made me think of, I've had several people in my world, call and just say, hey, David, what's going on today? And we have a nice conversation. And I've actually started taking, kind of borrowing this, but they will ask me at the end of the conversation, hey, is there anything I can do for you? No strings attached. And it's like, man, that is so, front and center. Like you said, there's so many times you feel like, man, yeah, you can do something for me, but what are you going to ask? That kind of thing.
Yep.
And I love being that person now. It's like, man, I love, like giving, like I forget who said it, give like you're made of it, like you're a river and you're just made of it. Like anyway, I love that posture. It feels right. By the way, you've said the Viktor Frankl quote so many times. This is the first time that I've ever heard the word freedom.
Really?
In that space, right?
Yeah.
There's stimulus and response, personal growth. I've heard that, right? But freedom. Yep. And I think that's something I want to explore more in that, in that space. We often get in this, the mode of reacting to things on any given day. But as far as consciously responding, to a moment, again, it's not just I'm growing for growth's sake. I'm growing because there's more freedom here, which is what? Joy. My life gets better. And I love that. I love the word freedom.
Yeah. And I think that's really about in that moment, in that space, is moving towards autonomy, right? Autonomy is the foundation, the basis for having freedom. And so I'm moving towards a self-governed decision with moral agency. That's how Merriam's dictionary defines autonomy.
Yeah.
And so the more I'm moving towards a high values-based decision, right? It's a good use of my virtues. And I'm doing it because it's important to me, right? I've chosen this. It's important, it's consistent with my values. I'm increasing my sense of autonomy, and therefore I'm expanding my sense of freedom. I love you mentioned earlier, right? The idea of the authentic exemplars and how there are some people that they just walk in and they just have a different impact. There's something about them. And I think anybody that's listening or just anybody in general, there's certain people in your life that, again, have a disproportionate amount of impact. Certain teachers, certain coaches, right? Certain bosses or leaders or family members. I've talked certainly about my grandpa and a few other people. And one of the things that I've learned, right, one of the things that we've unpacked and why we've put these three pieces together that we talked about is because I've recognized that the reason why those people are so incredibly impactful is that they are intrinsically motivated. They genuinely, deeply care about what they do and who they do it for. And so I'm sure if you think about teachers, right, like you can tell that they have a passion for the subject. And it's not just for the subject, though, but they care about teaching it. They care about the impact it has on students. And that might seem like really that's the basis for having authentic, impact. But you'd be surprised how many people, or go about their jobs, and they're just going through the motions, right? It's like every day that hamster on the wheel, and there's just a sense of kind of taking for granted, right, the day to day. But there are some people that go to work every day, and you can tell like they are exactly in the right job, in the right position, and they love the choices they're making. That's what I want. I want more people living out of that, because when you do, not only will your own happiness and freedom expand and exponentially,
Yeah.
right, but you'll notice the impact. All of a sudden, you will start creating impact where people are inspired. They'll be telling stories about you 10, 15, 20 years later. I took this class. I had this boss. I had this coach, right, that just poured into me in a way that forever changed the trajectory of my life, right?
And I think what you're really landing on here is this intrinsic sense of purpose. It's and I heard somebody I really respect the other day tweet, purpose is everything. But what's fascinating is unless you've dialed in on, your uniqueness and understand really what lights you up, you might be taking on someone else's definition of purpose because they just had some influence over you, that kind of thing. So that's why I feel like you mentioned a teacher and so on. I look back on several of my teachers. They had such an intrinsic motivation. It's like they didn't even have to. They weren't fabricating anything. They weren't trying. It was like,
Yeah.
this is so bedrock and core to who I am, that, and you could really tell too. And you talk about the clues, right? When they are operating in alignment with that,
Yep.
well, what happens, right? Their energy rises, their joy rises. They're just like, man, it feels really great to be me. And I know this. I notice on so many more days, even for myself, when I'm operating in my uniqueness, it just feels great to be alive. I've got a whiteboard here written with fully alive on it. And I think that's the goal, right? It's just to feel like, man, every part of me, every precious part of me, every courageous part of me, I understand it and I can access it. And when I operate in alignment with those things, it's like, oh yeah, this feels good.
Well, first off, Crystal, thank you. Really appreciate the thoughtful message there. Yeah, and when you're operating in that place, right, like the clarity of your purpose is so clear, right? Those teachers, those coaches, those bosses, you're not in there questioning whether or not they care about your success. They do, right? There's no doubt about it. And so again, your buy-in's going to go up. You're naturally going to care more too, because you can tell they care, that they feel a joy about what it is, and it makes you curious, kind of almost sense of like, why does this person care so much about this?
Right.
And it makes you more interested. And so it's amazing when you start to clarify these things and you start operating out of a place of real certainty, a conviction, of clarity, and then that turns into consistency of action.
Yeah.
You'll notice that your leadership, the impact that you have, will really start to expand. You'll start seeing people rise up to do their very best work.
And you feel, we, of course, in business, we talk about return on investment. So we feel the ROI, right? Right in here.
Oh yeah.
But on a real basic level, what if your organization, what if your business had people that were, had dialed into that for themselves, right? They were on a mission to stay in their lane and to have a virtuous impact. Not only do their work well, but to lift others up around them and cause everybody else in their organization to thrive. What if it wasn't just, 2 out of the 25 people that were on your team, but everybody operated in their strengths and their uniqueness? Yep. Talk about return on investment, productivity, and then just having a job, workplace setting that was really enjoyable. Company culture is often overlooked. I think we talk about it a lot, but sometimes people try to create company culture with a golf outing or some pizza day or something like that, right?
Yeah.
When it's so much, I'll just use the word better. It's not, it just gets, and it can be way better than having pajama day or some nonsense like that, right? This is you start shifting people's ideas around themselves, around certainty, around ambiguity. It changes absolutely everything. And not only do you get a return on investment financially, but your workplace becomes such a more enjoyable place to be.
Yeah, it's so true. We'll kind of wrap up here on, there's a concept known as the Lasada Line, and this really translates into, not the Lasada Line specifically, that terminology, but this notion of positive to negative interactions, right? So these moments of team building, these moments of encouragement, these moments of pouring into others, and all these moments that add to kind of a culture or identity bank account, right? And so the more that there are positive moments of constructive criticism, psychological safety, like all these things that add to, versus those moments that take away, right? Micromanaging, criticizing, emotional instability that creates havoc. So the 3-to-1 is the bare minimum line that is required. It's been researched over and over again, just to create kind of a functional, like semi-healthy culture, right?
Okay.
So that allows people, instead of going to work every day, dreading going there, being filled with fear, being worried about what's going to happen today, right? And really disliking their bosses and all that, all of a sudden they start to feel free to start to do their work and fulfill their role and their obligations. But when you raise that up to 5-to-1, that level of positive negative, all of a sudden you have a thriving culture where people love to come to work. And the benefits of that, you'll see less sick days, right? You'll see people rising up again to put in that extra effort. You'll see the bottom line, right? It's been proven that it actually increases the bottom line, that it makes more profit, which makes sense. When you have a happy group of people who are in the right position, they love to show up to work, there's no doubt that you're going to get a greater performance, right? And so, and we know that in marriage, it's also 5-to-1, and within your own headspace, it's 5-to-1. So
Yeah.
there's clearly something about that kind of interaction, but you're never going to get to that 5-to-1 if you haven't predetermined, right? Like, what do we stand for? What is the culture or identity that we're setting? Because culture at work really is just another word for identity, right? What is the identity you're setting for your business?
Yeah.
And that has to do with the day-to-day interactions. Am I creating a place where there's like we genuinely care about each other, right? Where we prioritize people and relationships. What are we reinforcing? What are we course correcting? When you start to set that with a level of consistency where people start to trust, hey, my business, what they really care about and the leaders there is me. They care about my success, right? They reinforce when I'm doing things with great character and, and again, that's unique for each company. So you need to kind of figure out based off leadership, ownership, things like that. But when you set that bar, it's amazing. It's truly, truly amazing what starts to happen. So
Predetermined, man, that's powerful. Yeah, you won't stumble into that. It's not
yeah.
you won't drift into that type of culture and identity. But man, great topic today.
Yeah. It was a lot of fun, David. I appreciate you. If anybody has any questions, hit us up. We genuinely, hopefully it comes off that we love this material. Like we love talking about this stuff. We love, providing resources. And if there's something more direct we can do, we love doing that too. So,
Yeah.
all right.